Hello to our audience joining us for today's Reuters Events webinar. We'll be talking about a new year, new talent, tackling the employee acquisition and retention crisis in insurance. Among today's topics, we'll be reviewing talent as a growing challenge within the insurance industry. In addition to talent availability, talent retention is also a growing priority as the cultural demands include flexible working hours, a focus on ESG, and competitive benefits, just to name a few. I am Michael Fidel, today's moderator. I am co-managing director of InsurTech Ohio, an organization focused on the innovation and evolution of the insurance industry, as well as the individual leaders making it happen. I am thrilled to be joined by count them, five panelists today. We have great leaders from several established companies. A brief introduction: we've got Damon Porter of Grange Insurance, Carrie Fraser of Westland Insurance Group, Bruce Baumgarten of CSAA Insurance Group, Shauna Oliver of Manulife, and Alex Frohmeyer, or Fro, of Beam Benefits. To each of our panelists, I'll give you an opportunity momentarily to better introduce yourselves. I want to, first encourage our audience to please send in any questions. Our panelists would love to take your questions into consideration in today's conversation, so send them over at any time. To our panelists, I'll go ahead and start with Fro. If you don't mind, provide a little bit deeper dive for a minute into your background as well as your passion around today's topic. Fro, go ahead and kick us off.
Thanks, Mike. I'm not Santa Claus. I'm, in fact, Alex Frohmeyer, as introduced already. Everybody calls me Fro. I am the co-founder and CEO of Beam Benefits. We're an employee benefits business with a digital-first approach. We operate in 43 states around the U.S. And for us, we're really excited to be here today for both topics that hit close to home and how we're building our growth stage business, going through a rapid ascent from 100 to 400 employees over the past couple of years, and what we do in our work itself, which is helping small and medium-sized businesses all over the country get the benefits they need to attract and retain the talent they need to win in whatever their business happens to be. So really excited to be here and excited to talk about some of our experiences inside the walls at building Beam, as well as what we see out in the market.
Thanks, Fro. Shauna, if you don't mind, I'll let you introduce yourself next.
Great, thanks. I'm Shauna Oliver. I lead global benefits and wellness for Manulife. We're a multinational organization with employees in about 40 countries. We have about 40,000 employees, where we believe very strongly in making lives better and decisions easier for our customers. I've been in the industry over 22 years. I'm about to defend my doctorate in February. So I have a really big passion in not only the benefits space, but really just looking holistically at employees with a very firm belief that companies can't exist without them. And it's our job cross-functionally to make sure they're supported from the minute we talk to them to the minute they leave our door. So I'm really excited to be able to share some perspectives with my esteemed colleagues today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Shauna. Bruce.
I'm Bruce Baumgarten, so I work for CSAA Insurance Group. We are 3,500 employees in the U.S. We're a personal lines carrier, a AAA insurer. And I've been in the talent space for over 25 years, and I've worked with CSAA for 16 years now. So for me, it really is, I'll say my title is Vice President of Talent, so I love this space. I really love this conversation. And for me, it really is, it's the acquisition through the retention. So I lead talent acquisition, corporate learning, talent management, and leadership development. So I really say what's that key employee experiences all the way from attraction through development and promotion.
Awesome, Bruce. Carrie?
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Fraser, Chief People Officer at Westland Insurance, based out of Vancouver, Canada. We're a national insurance brokerage. I actually joined Westland 3 years ago, so I'm brand new to the industry. It's been a really interesting time to start in a new role, in a new industry for myself, with right before the pandemic, going through this interesting labor market, inflation. So I just think it's so critical that we're having these conversations like this together. I'm happy to share insights and really be able to learn from my colleagues also. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Damon.
Good morning, everyone. Damon Porter, so exciting to join each of you today. I am the Chief Human Resources Officer at Grange Insurance. We are a property and casualty insurer headquartered in Columbus, Ohio. We've got about 1,250, 1,300 associates, and we operate in about 13 states. And our goal is to provide peace of mind and protection during life's unexpected events. And I've been with the organization for nearly 5 years now, and always welcome the opportunity to talk about talent, associate engagement, and just the broad topic that it is. I think, as someone mentioned before, the pandemic has changed so much in our world. And so I think how we think about talent and its broad implications is really changing as well. And it's just an exciting space to be in. And so looking forward to today's conversation.
Thanks, Damon. And thanks to all of our panelists again for joining me today. So we're going to dive into the first question, which I'll allow each of you to take a crack at. Bro, I'm going to come back to you first. At a board level, where does talent acquisition and talent retention rank? And give us a sense as to why.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because there's multiple ideas that we're holding in our head as a growth company at Beam. The war on talent, especially as a technology company, has never been more acute over the past 12, 18, 24 months now. So we're very fortunate as a business to have a lot of demand to want to work in our business. We spend a lot of time thinking not about the attraction equation, but making sure we have the right filter on our talent. And it's also been a moving target. The market has changed a lot over the past 6 months. So as a board, we're spending a lot of time these days looking at how we can get more strategic with talent, both how we're bringing in the right roles for the business at the right pacing, which I think has changed actually a lot over the past year for growth stage companies. And we're marrying that up to retention strategies, which aren't as much about how do we retain everybody, but it's how to get closer to roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities across the team so we're organized more effectively. There's a lot of chaos in building a growth company, and so we spend a certain amount of our time just making sure every base is covered. And now we're at phase 2 as a business, which is how do we make sure every base remains covered while we get more strategic, scalable, and thoughtful about how that shows up in the P&L in 2023.
Thanks, Ro. Shauna, how are you evaluating talent and prioritizing it? Shauna, you're on mute.
Apologies. I don't think it's unique to anyone on the panel. Talent is a top priority. We look at the situation like this. The more our industry is seen as playing an important role in the quality of people's lives and as a player in embracing and sharing more innovative science and technology, the more compelling we become as employers. I think the insurance industry as a whole, regardless of what type of insurance you come from, has a reputation that we're stale, stuck in the past, it's boring. I can't say that I actively talk about life insurance when I go out with my friends. And we have to make a stance to change that and positions us as cutting edge and making meaningful impacts in our customers' lives. Most people, and we know today, our younger generations are making a stand and they say they want to work for a company that has a set of values that align with theirs, right? So we know this for us at Manulife. We have made it very known to say we're working to help our customers live longer, healthier, better lives. We've seen this as a clear impact that mission is having on our customers' lives through our first and only behavioral insurance offering. Second thing that we do is we've invested in our communities very actively. We have a global impact agenda, which really focuses on sustained health and well-being. So in some ways, it's really looking at traditional things and asking different questions. I'd also say just, in the concept of attracting talent, it's also just as important, as Fro said, is retaining talent. We've developed something internally that we call our leadership DNA framework that focuses on 3 core capabilities. It's energizing, growing, and excelling. And this is encouraging our leaders to not only be accountable, but to meet very specific goals in how they work with their team, to have an always learning growth mindset. It's not a one and done, it's something that's perpetual, and to help others really unlock their potential. We really feel like those that grow grow and energize leadership capabilities, ensure that we're prioritizing people.
Thanks, Shauna. Yeah, Bruce, set the stage for us. How is CSAA approaching talent acquisition and retention?
Yeah, and I love where Shauna went, really, like, we need to be better at talking about how insurance is a noble profession. At the board level, I'll kind of do the difference of pre-pandemic. We already talked about, so CSAA Insurance Group, we focused on culture for years. And one thing when I talk to people who've been here a few months, I'm like, what's your biggest surprise? And the thing I hear a lot is the values are more than just words on a wall or a website. Oh, just a website, I guess. It really is. This is how we make decisions, et cetera. But what we did in 2019 is we started looking at talent as a risk, saying there, we need talent, especially in tech talent, as we're really growing our technology. And we started listing talent as a risk to be monitoring, and we came up with 5 KPIs to watch. What happened during the Great Resignation is the board said we need that elevated to a tier 1 risk. And we actually broke it down. So rather than saying here's a couple of KPIs around talent, we actually looked at every employee lifecycle stage, from attraction to recruiting to onboarding, development, promotion, attrition. And we started saying, what are the couple of KPIs per lifecycle stage? And from there, the board actually went from, we used to have a comp and governance committee. They delegated some of their governance to a different committee, and they changed their purpose to being a compensation and human capital committee. So now every committee meeting really is focused on more human capital metrics. And even our C-suite, I'll bring a little more internal. Our C-suite used to be HR as needed. We would have a topic during one of their team meetings. They've now carved out a special meeting every month just for HR topics. So they have their team meeting, and then they have an HR topics meeting.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for bringing some really interesting measurements, if you will, to that response. It's great to see how they're actually attacking this and reapproaching just the way they even think about talent. Carrie, very curious, how do you guys prioritize talent, and where is it ranking amongst all of the priorities at a board level?
Yeah, it's very high, and I really resonate with Bruce's comments. Like, I've really noticed this shift of importance pre-pandemic to now. And I think that what I've seen is the pandemic has just really pushed the talent to be a top priority. And I noticed that in things over my career, where now it is a topic at every board meeting that we have. They want to hear from me. I feel much more, HR is much more seen as the right-hand person to the CEO and COO. And that's really shifted, I think, through the pandemic. You speak with any leader, and their top challenge, or the thing that's keeping them up at night, is around people. So, we're really focused on how we're handling engagement and retention, how we're thinking about our strategies on recruitment, and the pipeline within the insurance industry. I think it's dwindling for a lot of us. Understanding and getting very clear on our employment brand, and then diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just taking some real action on that. So very, very high on the priority list.
Thanks, Carrie. And Damon, how is Grange thinking about this priority?
Yeah, as many of my colleagues have mentioned, this is certainly top of the list, right? As you think about talent and its impact on any organization. And I'd say specifically at the board level, there's a recognition that given our current volatile talent market, if you will, as well as all of the macroeconomic factors that are impacting all of us, talent truly can be and should be our differentiator. And that's how we've approached it. I'll piggyback on something that Bruce mentioned before. Prior to the pandemic, our board committee focused on compensation and benefits. It was the comp committee, right? We actually rebranded that entire committee. It's now referred to as the Human Capital and Total Rewards Committee. Not so much about the name, but more about its intent. And it's really to discuss topics at a much broader level. And so now, not only at that committee level, but at our full board meetings, there is consistent conversation around culture, engagement, associate development, change management, because all of those things have truly been elevated. I think Carrie mentioned this before. The pandemic has really helped to elevate and accelerate so many of those important functions. And so not only do we, from an HR perspective, have a seat at the table, I think more folks now are looking at us to truly influence what that future direction looks like across the company.
Interesting. Thank you, Damon. So Bruce, I want to come back to you. You talked a little bit about how you guys are reapproaching where talent will be applied and how to measure the success of talent. In terms of just evaluating and understanding the talent pool itself, very curious about how you see the characteristics of the talent landscape changing and how you are evaluating that ongoing change in what talent is available and what talent is even looking for.
Yeah, I'd say that's been a game changer for us. We used to hire by our major locations. So we were major locations that each held a few hundred people in a few states. And now we hire in the lower 48. And so it really is saying, okay, our talent pool went from being who's in a, able to commute to one of our locations for the most part, to where in the 48 states is the talent for a specific job. So a couple of things we've really done to understand it better is we got the recruiters tools to really say, for a specific job, what does it look like? So they have a couple of tools they can look at. So if IT comes to us looking for somebody from cyber, or marketing is looking for a special kind of analytics person, they have tools they can look at and they can see city by city, where's the tool with the competition for the tool? What's the compensation in that area look like? And we can really start to target of where do we want to be hiring for specific roles. It's not just where are we located, where's the talent located? And what that takes on some of the conversation is even the diversity of the different talent pools. So we become better, I was talking to an IT leader a couple weeks ago about the access they have to talent that 2 years ago, at best it would have been, can we get them to relocate? And now it's just access to that talent. So it's completely different. And then internally, we're huge on internal mobility. So we monitor internal mobility rates and talk to and we have our employee experience survey where we really look at what people's development look like, what are some of the benefits we can give them to help them really not just be in a job, but have a career at the company.
And Carrie, how are you working to better understand the talent pool?
Yeah, we've taken two significant actions to really understand the talent pool. One is internal to hear from our employees, and the second is external. And so I'll explain that a bit more. So we launched an internal program to hear from our employees. It's called Amplify Your Voice. And so we have a survey platform that we've implemented. It's automated through our HR system. So it includes onboarding surveys that go out automatically after 60 days. Exit interview surveys that are automated once somebody resigns. We have an engagement survey, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then also an always on digital suggestion box. And so that's given us really good access to hearing from people, and we can dig into the results. Our managers can view their own dashboards also. The second for external is we worked with a consultant that's an expert in the employment branding space. And so they did a lot of research for us in the talent market. So they looked at Glassdoor and Indeed reviews. They actually surveyed potential candidates, understood like why or why not, what they knew about Westland and our competitors. Also looked at our competitor websites and just some insights from that. And so that gave us really rich data about the talent market, about what they're looking for, why they're making the decisions that they are, and then even understanding where Westland can create an employment brand that's authentic. And we really want to own the human space, as we felt like that was a gap that's out there in the market.
Excellent. Appreciate that perspective. Damon, your thoughts on evaluating the talent pool?
Yeah, taking some similar approaches, internally, we launched about 2 years ago a very targeted and specific feedback and listening strategy across the enterprise, which consisted of typical surveying, traditional surveying, as well as pulse surveying of specific groups around the company. We also rolled out more consistent coffee talks. Those are monthly conversations that our senior leadership team members will sit down with associates, and all associates are able to attend. We've also supplemented that with more associate meetings and other focus groups that allow us to really gather the voice of our associates. That's really been the key, right? The central theme is hearing the voice of your associates, but at the same time, then doing something with what you hear. So that's really been our focus internally. Externally, we've been trying to broaden our reach, if you will, around acquiring talent. And a big piece of that has been trying to diversify our sources of talent. So beyond the typical colleges and university, recruiting that we do, we've also begun to engage more with organizations that are more focused on underrepresented communities. And that's really provided some significant lift for us. We're seeing that in some of our diversity measures and in some of the talent acquisition we've been able to achieve over the last couple of years. But I'd say the exciting piece is that as the world continues to change, the world is now opened up a bit more, right? Given how we work. We are an organization that continues to work in a hybrid environment, or in some cases virtual. So we've not returned to our physical offices unless associates have a desire to do so. So they're open, but it's up to the associate. It's completely optional if they'd like to return. So that gives us some flexibility that helps us to learn a little bit more about ourselves and how we get work done. But it also has become a really good attraction for additional talent and additional talent sources.
Yeah, it's fun to think about how it's a fun challenge to think about how we kind of own the communication paths as a company while also providing a level of flexibility to work whenever and from wherever at a level that's never didn't exist 3 years ago. Right. So that's interesting to bring that up. There's a lot to unpack there potentially. Shauna, coming to you, curious, how are you evaluating the talent pool?
Yeah, so I, in the spirit of time, I won't rehash a lot of the same things that we do, but maybe just tease out a couple nuanced things that haven't been shared. We, in addition to surveys internally for our internal pool, we sometimes take what I would say is a somewhat casual approach when we have meetings with employees, and I'll use the benefits space as an example, where we have a lot of Ask Me Anything sessions where our employees can literally ask us anything and give feedback in those sessions. We held sessions to talk about what was changing for benefits and annual enrollment this year, and had 6,000 people join. Between the US and Canada, which is almost 50% of our population, that stayed for over an hour. We had over 400 questions and comments come in. So we've really started to hone in on how to communicate and get people's attention, which is really hard to do when talking about these types of things. So even just more open forums and inviting the ability for people to give comments. We followed those with some in-person meetings, had several hundred people attend. So just listening and making leaders available. We had, I was at all of these meetings. Other senior leadership was at these meetings, went a long way. I would say from an external perspective, I think like all of my peers, we've spent a lot of time looking at data, whether it's exit interview data, whether it's data that the industry has collected to really understand why people are leaving organizations, right? Is it like lack of career development, inadequate total comp, uncaring and inspiring leaders, lack of meaningful work, just to name a few? They're all key reasons. And we know people have left their existing organizations and are potentially reluctant to go to new organizations because of these pain points. So we have taken, I would say particularly to social media in a way that we haven't before to amplify ways that we are addressing things like this and ways that we are committed to our ESG agendas, ways that we are showing how not only are we inclusive, but that we show that employees belong in our organization, how we have different employee resource groups within our organization, and really trying to address all of these types of issues that the data has called out proactively throughout the entire recruiting process, so that they don't have to be in the back of minds of potential candidates, but that it's a fluid conversation and that we're actively talking about it, so that it's addressed and hopefully rectified as we build the pool moving forward.
Thanks, Shauna. Fro, how are you evaluating talent?
The largest single investment I make every week as CEO in the business from a time perspective is in culture and talent. That shows up in a bunch of different ways in our business. We do a monthly all hands meeting, which is 75, 85% focused on cultural topics. And we have really worked hard to connect our team and all the data that we get through surveys and polls and feedback directly from teams. We try to connect that to themes that we then talk about transparently and openly. We reflect it back to the team. We do a lot of storytelling as well. Here's an example of our culture showing up in a super positive way. Here's an example of something that I think we missed on. And our leadership over the years has gotten really good at participating, not just in the process of helping us source and keep track of how different teams are feeling and operating in the business, but then how that shows up in our ability to get together and do retros. When something screws up, an initiative that fails, let's get together and like transparently talk about why we didn't nail the collaboration aspects of this particular project. And we publish that to the whole team. We're not like a radical transparency company per se, but we have found that the more that we share the context around the really, really good stuff that happens in the business and the really, really bad stuff that happens in the business, the more our folks, the people that just started 60 days ago and the people that have been here for years and years, the more they get and remain really engaged in the affairs of the business. And this remarkable thing happens over time, which is that people begin to police the culture themselves because they know what the expectations are and they know how it shows up in the business in ways that ultimately help create the outcomes that we desire. We then face that all externally in a little bit of the employer branding conversation, as well as how we filter for the talent we want to invite in the business. So we look everything through the lens of our core value set, which is built on the acronym of GRIT, growth, resilience, initiative, and tenacity. Then I added another T for team first. And that's an actual interview step everyone goes through in the business. You have to go through the GRIT interview, which is confirmatory diligence of a panel of beamers internally that are helping make sure that every single person we hire is going to meet our minimum standards of our values and our cultural ideals.
Thanks, Fro. I want to offer up to our audience a bit of a dynamic question to this panel. So there's a predominant expectation or sentiment that there is a talent shortage, and I think it's rather obvious that there is. However, I'd like to diversify the perspective amongst this group or see if there's a predominant similarity in how you feel about how extreme that talent shortage is. So if I were to give you, let's say, give you three options, either you believe that there is an extreme shortage across the board, almost every role there's an extreme shortage, or there's option two, somewhat of a shortage across the board, or is it then third option, a bit dependent on the roles with which you're trying to hire? Out of curiosity, gut reaction, raise your hands. How many of you would say there's an extreme shortage across the board? How many would say there's somewhat of a shortage across the board? And then option three, just to confirm, there's a shortage dependent on the role that you're looking for. Would that be the rest of you? Okay. So Shauna, let's lead off with you. You have a sentiment that there's somewhat of a shortage across the board. What's kind of driving that perspective? Shauna, on mute again.
I would say for me, what's driving that is just looking at open times for requisitions that we've had. It's having positions where historically we have had 50, 100 candidates apply and they've been posted now for several weeks with no applications. And it's not unique to any area. I would also say I think it's lack of quality candidates in some areas where we're getting evidence of a lot of people clearly just submitting their resume and not really understanding the roles that they're submitted for. And it's clearly not a good fit, but just, wait times, lack of applicants. And then I would say, just, people throwing things out there. I think another thing that we have seen is people who are trying to take advantage of the talent shortage in some ways, and really applying for jobs that are a level or two above of where they're at, trying to take advantage of, this might be it for me. And I think, like a lot of us, there have been a lot of instances where we've said this might be the best we can do, and what does that mean? So I definitely think it has changed.
Damon, as in your response, thinking about this as a bit dependent, very curious for where you see the shortage being most obvious versus where you aren't seeing as much of a shortage issue in talent availability.
Yeah, sure. We've fortunately, we've seen in most of our areas, we continue to see a fairly rich pool of candidates, right? But there are a few specific areas in our enterprise where over the last couple of years, I think it's been further exacerbated, some of the challenges in filling the gaps, whether those be areas such as our commercial underwriters or our territory sales managers, a lot of our technical talent, right? Actuaries, some of our data analysts. Those are some of the specific areas where we've had to be a bit more intentional around where we're trying to acquire talent, engaging with more sources, because it's been a little bit more challenging in those spaces. I will say the vast majority of our roles, whether they be, very business specific or a bit more on the corporate side, so insurance agnostic, they've been, we've continued to have success filling the roles, but there are a handful of specific areas for us that continue to be challenging, and we continue to be a bit more deliberate in our tactics to fill them.
Thanks, Damon. Carrie, I'll come to you. Curious for where you see the variability in shortage.
Yeah, so similar to Damon, I would say like the more corporate functions where you don't necessarily need to have insurance industry experience. We've had more success in that, especially with a lot of the unfortunate changes that are happening in other organizations with layoffs. For us, what we're seeing, it tends to be very location specific with some roles. So we operate in some very, very small communities where working from home or the hybrid option, we have branch. So it's walk-in available for our clients. So I think those small communities where we expect people to be in the majority of the time on site, it's more challenging, right? People are really rethinking that. We've really tried to thinking about like the insurance advisor role, which is the majority of our employees in our recruiting, is instead of just trying to take from competitors all the time, because obviously that's a talent pool and it's an option. I think it's really important to open it up. And so we've built a trainee program and thinking about like, let's bring from in outside. There's a whole talent pool from there that we can train, help them get licensed and grow instead of just trying to take from competitors all the time.
Thanks, Gary. Fro, I want to give you the same question, but to mix it up a touch, is there also, in addition to like where the talent shortage is or is not, is there anything that can predominantly change and eliminate this shortage altogether as just an additional facet to your response?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, Beam kind of puts one foot in two different talent pools. So we have a lot of roles that either require or prefer employee benefits or insurance background and experience. But we're also a venture-backed tech company. So we fish in a lot of talent pools around competing against other tech companies and digital businesses for talent. And because of that, we have the most common thing we run into from a talent shortage perspective isn't so much the shortage, but it's the leverage that employees have had, especially ones that have experience with other venture-backed businesses, where at a certain price you can attract tons of talent, but that price has gotten twice, maybe even 3 times higher in the past 18 months. And so I think many companies like ours are a bit subject to being prisoners of the moment around talent availability, because it's not really just that the talent might come with a very rare specialized skill set, like data engineering, for example. It might also be that that was a role that's gone from a $150,000 base salary to a $350,000 base salary in a very, very short period of time. So it forces companies like ours to make trade-offs on how to budget appropriately for those types of roles, decide how much you really need that role, make a decision on seniority. Can you build versus buy? Can you grow talent internally to cover some of those needed skills? And I think that market is changing really quickly. The venture-backed market is changing really quickly. So we see a certain amount of volatility now in highly publicized tech layoffs, which are starting to kind of reorient not just the comp and benefits piece of the spectrum, but also how that shows up in the availability question as well.
Thanks, Fro. And Bruce, your thoughts on the variability of where the shortage is impacting your business or the industry from what you are gleaming? And also, is there anything in particular? Compensation seems, Fro, like the obvious one. Are there levers at our disposal as an industry that we can push on in order to eliminate, or is there a market factor even? Some of the layoffs is a good example where the market is kind of changing maybe back towards an employer-centric beneficial perspective.
I'll go from where I'll go with Damon and Carrie a lot, and you talked about some of the metrics Sean had too. Our time to fill has stayed pretty well in a lot of areas, minus some areas like in cyber or actuary or data science, those areas. From a longer term perspective, I really look at the insurance industry. So overall unemployment is 3.7. Insurance is 1.5%, and we've been under 2.5% for years. So as you look forward, I think the insurance industry is going to be under 2% for a while. And you start to say, okay, do I need insurance background or not? Well, even the tech industry, even with the layoffs, is still only at 2.2% unemployment. So it really has to be, how can we, like where you're going with this, Mike, it's the what can we do about it? I think the issue is going to be there from a macroeconomy perspective. I think we're starting to see where people are less likely to leave. So the Great Resignation, some articles this year became the Great Regret. And we saw some of that too. We call them boomerang employees. It's the I left and it wasn't as good as I thought. Can I come back, please? And it really gets to be from how can we sell the insurance industry? So I start to say, how can we be starting to engage with, for a couple of the unique things we're starting to do is, what are some nonprofits we can engage in that tap different labor markets, different talent pools that we've never done before? What are some of the colleges and universities where people aren't thinking about insurance as a profession, but we can introduce them to how noble the industry really is because they want to really help? What are the things we're doing around ESG? My company's in personal lines. We talk about wildfire, and it really is a win-win when it's not just how do you help people recover from something, but how do you help people prevent something from even losing their goods to start with. And we can show the nobility of helping people. Insurance is a great place to go. Plus, it's actually really interesting. Who would have known? 16 years ago when I joined the industry, I'm like, yeah, I could do that for a few years. I love insurance. Now people call me insurance geek. Because it really is, what can you do to help people's lives become better? You heard all the panelists talk about that. So the longer term part, as we're seeing retirements and we're seeing less unretirements, as you look at that stat too, as people are retiring and they're less likely to unretire than they used to, how can we start getting to the younger talent and getting people that are still selecting their profession? And even if they don't want to be insurance professionals, we have such a wide variety of professions between HR, marketing, general analytics, tech. How can we attract them into our industry to say you can do the job you want and you can help people while you do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And for any other insurance geeks or nerds out there, you've come to the right place. I would love to talk tactically for a second in terms of recruitment channels. Bruce, you actually, I think, teed up a great segue. You talked about going to colleges and opening up avenues to talk to talent, maybe often before the insurance industry was starting to recruit and talk to talent previously. So that's a good example of a way to open up a rather untapped, surprisingly untapped channel within the insurance market. Carrie, I'll orient this question towards you first. What are some of the creative options in terms of recruitment that you see your company starting to tap into that maybe they weren't tapping into either at all or at least as much in the past?
Yeah, so we've done the same thing where we've really looked to partner with organizations, so schools, universities, programs, associations, and really build knowledge around not only Westland, but the insurance industry. I think the one thing that's worked for us really well is we've actually hired somebody on the team that just focuses on building partnerships and running those programs. I think previously, and I've seen it in a lot of organizations, we ask talent acquisition or recruiters to do that off the side of their desks. And I have found that has not been most effective because there's so many job postings that they're managing that kind of fall back into post and pray. So I think to have somebody that's solely reliant on working on those creative solutions and building their relationships has been really helpful. The other piece is if we're going to hire people from outside of the industry, we got to be ready to, what are we going to make sure that they're successful? So the first thing we did is build a trainee program, and it's really just meant to support people, get them licensed quickly and successfully so they aren't floundering for a long time and they're going to be successful. So those two things to me have to go together.
Those are great tactics. Fro, what sort of tactics come to mind?
Yeah, we're doing some general employer branding stuff. We were a 2021 Inc. Best Workplace, and we invest in a certain amount of just getting our name out there. We're a small company, and so visibility matters a lot to us. And then we do a couple specific things that I think are interesting and certainly creative. A couple of our more specialized talent pools. We have our leaders of those functional areas build or volunteer their time to do like case competitions, where the competitors in the competitions, usually in schools or just post-grad, will actually be using the case that our team builds and working with it. That's a phenomenal way to not just get visibility, but also turn it into a hiring and interview opportunity. Another thing we do is, we'll be talking more about next year that I'm really excited about, is aligning our core values. I mentioned them earlier, built around the acronym of GRID, aligning those core values to populations of people we see that display those values. Good examples here are athletes. We have a special relationship with the local professional ballet company here in Columbus. My wife is on the board. She's a former ballet dancer. It's a very gritty group of people. So we hire ballet dancers, part-time and full-time, as a very specific place where we find the right type of cultural fit in the business. They don't have the right skills for our business. And so that's you're growing professionals, but you're growing them off a base of phenomenal culture fit from day one. So those are places that we look a little bit asymmetrically from the talent pool perspective.
Shauna, your thoughts on tactics?
Yeah, so maybe in the spirit of sharing something different that we haven't heard, like a lot of the panel, we've really leaned into the belief that DE&I should be a core component of our decision making as we assess our hiring practices, and we've really begun to systemically track demographics served by our partners programs and leadership representation. So in our spirit of really looking at how we embrace DE&I internally and externally. One of the things we did as part of our commitment is our U.S. team hosted its first ever supplier diversity fair. We had over 100 vendors come in to learn about doing business with Manulife. So we hosted them on site. We talked to them. We specifically invited all types of vendors, but specifically targeted vendors of companies that were led by underrepresented minorities. And this for us really accomplishes several things. It gets our name out in the community. We invite smaller, maybe lesser known suppliers that might be able to provide a service to our company that we don't have, or that we're seeking to fill. But it also gets us a lot of recognition in the community. It gets a lot of people more familiar with us as a company. It breaks some of those more stagnant barriers and stereotypes that we talked about earlier. So it then kind of gets our awareness out of, here's an insurance company that maybe has historically been viewed as stodgy, really making an impact in the community, really trying to do the right thing, really living its values. and therefore, lends itself to extending our external talent pool and looking at recruiting in different ways.
Thanks, Shauna. So, Bruce, I'm going to ask you the same question in terms of tactics in case anything unique comes to mind. But in order to maybe diversify your response, let me open it up as well to what you think are. Is there any sort of ability to rank the levers? Obviously, compensation is one in terms of levers that you can bring to the table and throttle up or down in order to get that talent. So once you're attacking a recruitment channel, if there are any tactics in addition that come to mind, what levers are really in play? And is there any priority to those levers in terms of the reaction you're seeing from talent in order to get the talent you want to come on in?
I'd say from the looking at the first part of the question is, a couple of the other tactics we do, in addition to some of the great things I've been hearing from the other panelists. We also talk to our ERGs to say, from your perspective, from your community's perspective, what is the value proposition we offer? What's the experience we offer or don't? And let's be honest with ourselves, we need to improve there. And externally, one thing we've learned the last couple of years is really, and I heard it embedded in the different parts, but it's about the relationships. It's not going to an external partner for a one-time job opening. It's how do you build that relationship with that community, and longer term, you start to see that. Mike, to the second part of your question, compensation, that's the table stakes. So it's how do you is it worth having a discussion? After that, we rely a lot in our culture, and I've heard it multiple times. People have selected us if the pay was comparable, equal, a little bit better, and they hear about the different things we do. So what is the culture that we offer? So we've been focusing on our culture for a long time now. And we offer some unique benefits around, volunteering, and we do enrichment time where people can use that for volunteering, development, ERG involvement, et cetera. So here's the environment you get to work within. So let's have the table stakes with compensation, which our compensation team does an amazing job keeping up of what's going on with it. They've even offered internal webinars to explain how do they decide salary ranges. Salary ranges are posted internally on the internet. So anybody can look up jobs and by geocode and say, here's what the pay range is for that area. And after that, deliver the experience you promise. When we think about the value proposition, we talk about it as a handshake. When you're offering a candidate a job, you're promising them more than just pay. You're offering them total rewards and an environment they're going to work in. Now, how do you deliver on that?
Awesome. And Damon, same question to you. Tactics as well as levers for getting that talent to come in the door.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. On the tactics side, one of the things we focused on recently is really redefining our relationship that we have with some of our local universities and colleges, right? So in addition to some of those close partnerships we have with Ohio State or Columbus State or a number of other universities, we're now a bit more hands-on and visible on the campuses with those organizations. I laughed when Fro mentioned before the case competitions, right? We've engaged in a number of those types of opportunities, real world projects to get some of those students engaged with our associates. And some of the results from those opportunities have just been tremendous, for both sides, right? And so that's been one way that we've tried to reframe those university relationships. We've also tried to raise awareness around insurance as a whole at an earlier level for students. So not just getting into high schools, but even in junior high schools and middle schools where we're engaging with kids, right? Because we all know that insurance may not be at the top of the list for most as the sexy industry, right? We understand that. But how can we truly affect that narrative? How can we change it so folks understand, as Bruce has mentioned, it truly is a noble profession. And you know what? There's so much more to it than simply selling insurance, right? Or being an underwriter, or we've got to move folks, students included, away from perhaps some of those preconceived notions of what insurance is and what opportunities may be in the insurance industry. When we go to that value prop question that you asked, Mike, obviously compensation is table stakes. One of the things that we like to do with all of our potential candidates is truly help them understand the broader picture. It truly is the value proposition. It's not just comp. It's not just benefits, right? It's the culture. It's how things get done in an environment. It's the flexibility of the work. All of those things are so important. And when you can tell that full story, that comprehensive story, we have found that to be tremendously helpful for us on the recruiting trail. We also have begun to tell that story a bit better and a bit differently internally, which has really, driven our retention as well. Because it's interesting that, associates, many of whom have, maybe sat in a particular role for some period of time, or, not moved into different positions throughout their career, they may not know what they actually have, right? And so helping them understand, here's your full total rewards package. Here are all the things that you receive as being a part of Grange Insurance. Those are some of the things that we're trying to do to truly raise that awareness. And we're finding that we're getting true benefit both internally as well as externally.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So we're about 9 minutes left in today's webinar. I want to encourage our audience who's viewing live to keep the questions coming. I'll start to move a little bit more quickly around the panel and allow maybe one or two of you to answer as many questions as we can fit in. So a little bit more rapid fire as we close out here. Carrie, I'm going to come to you. So we talked about levers on grabbing talent that is outside of our company that's fresh. What about the levers in terms of compensation or anything else that's really playing a key role in talent retention?
Yeah, so what we hear is it's really around people's career development. My manager and the company care about my career and the opportunities that are available for me. Compensation is important. Table stakes, as a couple of other people have said. The other is this: I feel cared about. So I feel like my manager and the employee care about me as a whole person now. I can't just leave personal life at the door anymore. It all comes together, and we're dealing with so many different things in our families and our lives. And I want to make sure that I have the flexibility as an employee, and my employer is going to support that. And so I think that's been that's come out of, I think it's always been there, but the pandemic, again, people just said, no, like that's enough. It's got to happen now. I need to be cared about.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Shauna, same question to you, but I'll add this comment as well. We talked about how fast compensation for recruiting fresh talent has grown. Are we seeing the same growth in compensation demands amongst our existing employee base? How is that potentially playing a role in keeping the talent?
Yeah, I would say definitely, we and I think that comes down to knowing where you stand in compensation, knowing how regularly you go out and benchmark where your comp levels are, knowing what your total package looks like. Benefits for the first time this year was ranked number 2 in importance, I think, for recruiting, and number 3 for retention, or it could be vice versa. But the package is more important than ever before. So arming managers to be able to talk with confidence and not just be able to consistently come back to leadership and say, my high performer is going to leave if we don't give them more money. We have to be able to arm our managers to be able to have confident conversations. Um, Two other things that I'll share that we've done for our existing employee population, the things that the topics very much resonate with what Carrie said. But an example of something we've done in the more employee well-being space is we launched a program called Elevate, which essentially runs in parallel with our well-being program. It celebrates all the different ways employees can kind of nurture their well-being, from healthy eating to mindfulness and gratitude. Employees who submit photos via internal social media or external get a chance to win big prizes like a Peloton bike or a Marriott Bonvoy credit. And we have celebrity guests come in. We currently have like a employee photography exhibit kind of rotating globally. These are things that in the scheme of things aren't big budget items, but to have senior leaders talk about a well-being element that they're passionate about has really resonated. Learning's also really important to us. We launched during the pandemic something called Fuel Up Friday. We give the second Friday of every month. So for me, that's tomorrow. Half of the day is dedicated for all of our employees towards learning. We have a topic that we want our employees to learn and spend their time on. But it can really be anything to invest in new skills, whether it's, enhancing creativity, human-centered design, leadership. So it could be something very technical in your role, like, I'm studying for an actuarial exam, or, I've taken classes in, artificial intelligence as a business strategy. So, but we, every employee, to the extent they can do it, takes that day, takes that time as just a demonstration to our employees that we value you, we value your career development, and we want to help you succeed.
Thanks, Shauna. Damon, I want to shift the topic over to management. So supervisors play a highly influential role, as one of our audience members put it. I think that's a fair perspective to have. How is supervisor training playing a critical role in talent retention?
Yeah, I'd say two areas of focus for us. One has been providing the tools and the resources for our managers to be successful in our hybrid work environment, right? As I mentioned before, we're still, fully in that environment, and that was something that was a bit, foreign for some of our management team prior to the pandemic, right? So, of course, we initially, launched some of those, toolkits and, things, best practices that they could use. But now, even, a couple of years later, it's continuing to arm them with information and skills so that they can, best support our associates and create an environment where our associates can be successful. Another area where we're really focusing our management on as far as training and development is in the space of change management. And I know we haven't talked a lot about that on this call, but I will say that's one of our key pillars as we're going through, a period of transformation. One of the quotes that we like to use at Grange is that the pace of change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again, right? And so how do you equip folks for this new reality? And so we have a very large change champion network that includes nearly 250 of our associates who voluntarily raise their hand to say, I want to be a part of change. I want to be an advocate. And so they then represent their respective teams and their organizations, and they become stewards for change across the enterprise. And so we get our managers connected in that space, as well as other training related to change and to transformation. And we found that has really helped to position them confidently so that they can talk the talk and explain to their associates the why behind some of the change that we're experiencing.
Awesome. Thanks, Damon. Bruce, I'm going to come to you. We're about 2 minutes out. So if you could keep it to less than 60 seconds, a little tinge of pressure for you. So just talk us through your thoughts on both supervisor training as well as just getting maybe a little bit ahead of the succession. There's some volatility here in terms of turnover, new talent coming in, other existing talent kind of moving across the organization. Just some concluding thoughts on how you approach that.
From a supervisor, so we have cohort-based programs for aspiring leaders, new leaders, tenured leaders. The other thing we've done the last couple of years is every month we have something for existing leaders that are not in the cohort-based program. So, and we advertise it through our internet and emails and everything. So depending on the topic they want, if it's hybrid leadership, if it's emotional intelligence, if it's something from Brene Brown, whatever it is, there's something every month that leaders can choose to go to keep up on their training versus waiting for a cohort-based program, in addition to e-learning and other things that are available to them. From a succession plan, that's something we definitely do. So we monitor our succession plans and we look at our people. Are they ready now? Are they going to be great candidates for it? And they still need to compete for it. Or are they ready now? Or what's their development look like? And that's something that goes to the board level. And we look at, from especially executive succession plans, what percentage have people who are ready or ready with development, and what are those development conversations? So we have great dialogue with that. I'll say internally, every department talks about who are the up and comers and what are we doing for them? What is their development? What we've done different this last year is people can opt in to say, I want to be promoted, and then we make sure we spend some time focusing on them.
Awesome. And then Fro, close us out as our insurance evangelist. Why is this a great career, and how do we better express this opportunity to particularly those that don't know the insurance industry? 30 seconds.
More has changed in the insurance industry in the past 5 years than probably the 50 previous. And I think that pace of change to the internal transformation Grange is doing, I think is never going to be this slow again. So it's an exciting time to be in the insurance industry, simply because what has been characterized as a stodgy old school career is now getting fresh legs, new companies, new technology, new applications. It's an exciting time.
Awesome. Panelists, thanks. Great job today. To our audience, thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.